The evening had been peaceful until now. Marcus Johnson drove along a familiar suburban road, the kind lined with neatly trimmed hedges and houses that looked like they belonged in a magazine. It was just another day winding down after hours, spent in the courthouse listening to arguments, making tough decisions, and ensuring justice was served fairly. He liked this part of town. It reminded him of simpler times when life didn't feel so complicated. But tonight something felt different. As he approached a quiet intersection, Marcus noticed flashing lights behind him. At first he thought maybe it was an ambulance or a fire truck rushing somewhere important. But then he realized the lights were coming closer, growing brighter in his rearview mirror. His heart skipped a beat. It wasn't an emergency vehicle, it was a police car, and it was pulling him over. Marcus slowed down, signaling before pulling over to the side of the road. He turned off the engine and took a deep breath. He hadn't done anything wrong, no speeding, no reckless driving, nothing out of the ordinary. Still, being pulled over always made him uneasy. Not because he doubted himself, but because he knew how these situations could go sometimes. Being a black man in America meant you never knew what to expect, even if you followed all the rules. He rolled down his window and waited. The cool night air drifted in, carrying the faint smell of freshly cut grass. A moment later, a tall figure appeared outside his car. It was Officer Kevin Doyle wearing his uniform and cap, holding a flashlight aimed directly at Marcus's face. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said politely, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel. "Is there a problem?" Doyle didn't respond right away. Instead, he shone the flashlight around the interior of the car, inspecting every detail. Marcus watched him carefully, trying not to let his nerves show. Finally, Doyle spoke. "License and registration, please." "Of course," Marcus replied calmly. He reached into his pocket for his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Then he leaned forward slightly to grab the registration from the glove compartment. As he did, Doyle stepped back, resting his hand on the holster of his gun. Marcus froze for a second, feeling a chill run down his spine. Was this really necessary? He forced himself to stay calm and handed over the documents. Doyle glanced at the license, his eyes narrowing as he read the name. "Marcus Johnson?" he asked, his tone sharp. "That's correct," Marcus answered, nodding. "Is there a reason I was stopped, officer?" "You were swerving between lanes back there," Doyle said quickly, though his voice lacked conviction. Marcus frowned. Swerving? That wasn't true. He'd been driving perfectly straight. Before he could say anything, Doyle continued. "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Johnson?" Marcus hesitated. Why was this relevant? "I'm a judge," he said simply, hoping the answer would put the officer at ease. "A judge?" Doyle repeated, scoffing. There was disbelief in his voice, as if the idea of a black man holding such a position was laughable. "You don't look like a judge." Marcus clenched his jaw but kept his composure. "I assure you, officer, I am one. If you check my credentials, you'll see." "I'll decide what I need to check," Doyle interrupted sharply. He leaned closer to the window, peering into the car again. "This your vehicle?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "It's registered under my name." Doyle ignored him and began typing something into his tablet. After a moment, he looked up again. "Funny thing," he said, smirking. "Your car doesn't match the description we have on file. We've had reports of a stolen vehicle matching this make and model." Marcus stared at him, incredulous. "That's impossible. This is my car. You can verify the registration if you'd like." But Doyle wasn't listening anymore. He called for backup over his radio, his tone clipped and authoritative. "Suspect claims ownership of reported stolen vehicle, requesting additional units on site." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't right. None of this added up. He hadn't broken any laws, yet here he was, accused of stealing his own car. People passing by on the sidewalk had started to notice the commotion. Some stopped to watch while others whispered among themselves. Marcus caught snippets of their conversations, words like racist and unfair. He wanted to tell them he was fine, that everything would be okay, but even he wasn't sure anymore. Minutes passed and 2 more police cars arrived, their sirens wailing before falling silent. Out stepped 2 officers Marcus didn't recognize. One was a burly man with a buzz cut, while the other was a wiry woman with sharp features. They conferred briefly with Doyle before approaching Marcus's car. The woman introduced herself as Agent Linda Hayes, though her badge looked unfamiliar. Something about her demeanor seemed off, almost rehearsed. "We're going to need you to step out of the vehicle, sir," she said firmly. Marcus hesitated. "On what grounds?" "For questioning," Hayes replied, avoiding eye contact. "Please, cooperate, or we'll have to take further action." Reluctantly, Marcus opened the door and stepped out. The cool night air hit him again, but this time it felt heavier, suffocating. Doyle stood nearby, glaring at him with undisguised contempt. The other officer, whose name tag read Ryan, circled the car, inspecting it closely. Meanwhile, Hayes began asking questions, her tone growing increasingly accusatory. "What court do you preside over?" she demanded. "The Superior Court," Marcus answered evenly. "I've been serving there for nearly 15 years. "And where were you coming from tonight?" Hayes pressed. "I was heading home after work," Marcus explained. "Like, I told Officer Doyle earlier I haven't done anything wrong." Hayes exchanged a glance with Ryan, who shook his head subtly. Whatever they were thinking, it wasn't good. Marcus could feel the situation spiraling out of control. Bystanders continued to gather, some filming the encounter on their phones. Among them was a young woman named Clara, who lived nearby. She recognized Marcus from news articles about his groundbreaking rulings. Seeing him treated this way filled her with anger and sadness. "This is ridiculous," Clara muttered to a friend standing beside her. "They're harassing him just because of the color of his skin." Her words carried across the street, drawing murmurs of agreement from others. Doyle shot her a warning glare, but Clara refused to back down. She raised her phone higher, determined to document everything. Back at the car, Marcus tried once more to reason with the officers. "Look, you can call the courthouse if you want. They'll confirm who I am. This whole thing is a misunderstanding." "But," Hayes cut him off. "We'll handle this our way, thank you very much." With that, she motioned for Ryan to cuff Marcus. Despite his protests, he found himself restrained and placed in the back of a patrol car. As they drove away, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a traffic stop. There was something bigger going on here, something far more sinister than he could have imagined. For now, all he could do was sit tight and hope someone would listen to reason. Little did he know this was only the beginning of a journey that would test his strength, courage, and faith in justice itself. The patrol car ride was long and uncomfortable. Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. He replayed the events over and over again. The aggressive tone of Officer Doyle, the suspicious behavior of Agents Hayes and Ryan, and the growing crowd of bystanders who seemed to know something wasn't right. None of it added up. Why would they accuse him of stealing a car that clearly belonged to him? And why did they seem so determined to ignore his identity as a judge? When they finally arrived at the precinct, things only got stranger. Instead of being taken inside the main building, Marcus was led through a side entrance and down a narrow staircase. The air grew colder with each step, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the concrete walls. Something about this place felt wrong. It didn't look like any police station he'd ever seen before. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a large room filled with strange equipment. Monitors blinked with streams of data, and wires snaked across the floor, connecting various devices. In the center of the room stood an enormous machine, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It hummed softly, emitting a faint blue glow that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, glowing faintly under the dim light. Marcus stared at it, feeling a mix of awe and unease. "What is this?" he asked, breaking the silence. No one answered. Instead, Hayes motioned for Ryan to secure Marcus to a chair nearby. Though he struggled briefly, Marcus knew there was no point resisting. For now, he needed to stay calm and observe. Maybe then, he could figure out what was really going on. As Ryan tightened the restraints, Hayes turned her attention back to the machine. She began typing furiously on a nearby keyboard, her eyes darting between the screens and the device. Doyle stood off, to the side, watching everything with a smug expression. Marcus noticed how relaxed he seemed now, as if whatever was happening here was exactly what he wanted. "Why am I here?" Marcus demanded, raising his voice slightly. "You can't keep me locked up without cause." Hayes glanced at him briefly, but didn't respond. Instead, she called out to someone behind Marcus. "Dr. Grant, we're ready." A moment later, a woman emerged from the shadows. She looked to be in her mid-30s, with short brown hair and glasses perched on her nose. She wore a white lab coat, though it looked more like a uniform than a choice. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the machine, and her eyes avoided meeting Marcus's gaze. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, trying to sound calm despite the rising tension in his chest. "I'm Dr. Emily Grant," she replied softly. I work with them." "With who?" Marcus pressed. "What is this place?" Emily hesitated, glancing nervously at Hayes and Ryan. When neither objected, she took a deep breath and began speaking. "This is part of a secret organization. They call themselves the Order of Purity. Their goal is to reshape humanity. They believe certain traits should be eliminated, traits they see as undesirable." Marcus frowned, struggling to process what she was saying. "And what does that have to do with me?" "They target people like you," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "People who challenge their worldview, people who succeed despite not fitting their idea of perfection." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Everything suddenly clicked into place: the traffic stop, the accusations, the bizarre setup. This wasn't about a stolen car or some random misunderstanding. It was about him. His success, his influence, his very existence challenged their twisted beliefs, and they saw him as a threat. Before he could respond, Hayes interrupted. "Enough talking. Let's get started." Emily nodded reluctantly and returned to the machine. As she worked, Marcus noticed the symbols glowing brighter, their light casting strange patterns on the walls. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor and into his bones. Whatever this thing was, it was powerful and dangerous. Desperate to understand more, Marcus turned his attention back to Emily. "How does this machine work?" he asked quietly. "What are they planning to do with it?" Emily hesitated again, weighing the risks of answering. Finally, she spoke. "It uses alien technology, something they discovered years ago. They've been experimenting with it, trying to manipulate DNA. Tonight, they plan to activate it on a larger scale. If they succeed, they'll be able to alter human genetics permanently." Marcus's stomach dropped. Alter genetics permanently? The implications were staggering. "But why would anyone want to do that?" he asked, his voice shaking. "To control society," Emily explained. "To create a world where only certain kinds of people exist. A world where people like you don't." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. These people weren't just racists. They were extremists, willing to use advanced technology to enforce their ideals. And now they had him trapped in the middle of it all. Time seemed to slow as the machine powered up. The glow intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly light. Hayes and Ryan stepped back, joining Doyle near the doorway. Even they seemed uneasy, though their loyalty to the order kept them rooted in place. Emily remained at the controls, her hands trembling as she prepared to initiate the final sequence. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said urgently, looking directly at Emily. "Help me stop them. Together we can expose this madness." For a moment, Emily froze. Her eyes met his, filled with conflict and fear. Then slowly, she nodded. "I'll try," she whispered. "But we don't have much time." With that, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device disguised as a pen. Leaning close to Marcus, she slipped it into his hand. "Use this to disable the restraints," she instructed quickly. "It won't last long, so act fast." Marcus gripped the device, Tightly, his heart pounding, this was his chance. As Emily returned to the machine, pretending to adjust settings, Marcus activated the pen. A sharp click echoed through the room and the restraints fell away. He stood cautiously, scanning the area for an opportunity to escape. The timing couldn't have been better. Just as Marcus freed himself, the machine emitted a loud whirring sound signaling its activation. Sparks flew from the console, and the symbols on the walls began to pulse erratically. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and red warning lights flashed. Throughout the room, seizing the moment, Marcus lunged toward Hayes, grabbing her badge and radio. "What's going on?" he shouted, using the confusion to his advantage. Hayes stumbled back, startled, while Ryan and Doyle rushed forward to intervene. "Stop him," Hayes yelled, pointing at Marcus, but Marcus was already moving. He dodged Ryan's grasp and sprinted toward the staircase, clutching the stolen items tightly. Behind him, the machine let out a deafening roar, followed by a burst of energy that shook the entire facility. The ground trembled beneath his feet as he climbed the stairs 2 at a time, desperate to reach the surface. When he finally emerged into the cool night air, Marcus gasped for breath. The precinct grounds were deserted, save for a few parked cars. Without hesitation, he ran toward the nearest vehicle, a beat-up sedan, and smashed the window with his elbow. Using the pen device, he hotwired the car and sped off into the darkness, leaving the chaos behind. Though he was free for now, Marcus knew this wasn't over. The Order of Purity still existed, and their plans threatened countless lives. But, armed with evidence and determination, Marcus vowed to fight back, not just for himself but for everyone who believed in equality and justice. Little did he know, his journey was only beginning. Marcus drove fast, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he sped away from the precinct. The stolen car rattled and groaned under the strain, but he didn't care. All that mattered was putting distance between himself and the Order of Purity. Every second felt like an eternity, and his mind raced with questions. Where could he go? Who could he trust? And most importantly, how could he stop them? As he navigated the empty streets, Marcus glanced at the items he'd taken. From Hayes, the badge and radio. They might not seem like much, but they were proof. Proof that something sinister was happening beneath the surface of law enforcement. He needed to find someone who could help him expose the truth. Someone brave enough to listen. His thoughts turned to Dr. Emily Grant. She had risked everything to give him the device that freed him. Without her, he'd still be trapped in that underground lab at the mercy of the Order. If anyone could shed light on their plans, it was her. But first, he had to figure out where she was, and whether she was safe. Determined, Marcus pulled over near a quiet gas station. He turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. Then he picked up the radio and pressed the button. "Hello?" he said cautiously. "Is anyone there?" Static crackled in response. Marcus frowned and tried again. "This is Judge Marcus Johnson. I need to speak with Dr. Emily Grant." There was a pause, followed by more static. Just as Marcus was about to give up, a voice came through. It was faint but clear. "Judge Johnson?" It was Emily's voice. Relief washed over him. "Dr. Grant, thank goodness. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, for now," she replied, her tone urgent. "But you don't have much time. They're looking for you." "I know," Marcus said quickly. "Listen, I need your help. Tell me everything you can about the Order and their plans." Emily hesitated, then began speaking rapidly. They've been experimenting with the alien technology for years. At first, it was just small-scale tests, altering DNA samples in labs. But tonight, they planned to activate the machine on a larger scale. If successful, it would have allowed them to rewrite human genetics across entire populations. Marcus's stomach churned. Why would they do such a thing? "They believe in purity," Emily explained bitterly. "To them, anyone who doesn't fit their ideal image is a threat. People like you, successful, influential, and different, are living proof that their beliefs are wrong. That's why they targeted you." Marcus clenched his jaw. "And what happens if they succeed?" "Chaos," Emily said simply. Entire communities wiped out, generations erased, a world controlled by fear and hatred. "We can't let that happen," Marcus said firmly. "Tell me how to stop them." "It won't be easy," Emily warned. "The machine is tied to a central hub deep within the facility. If you destroy the hub, you'll disable the system, but you'll have to get past their security first." Marcus nodded even though she couldn't see him. "I'll find a way. Meet me somewhere safe. We'll work together to take them down." After a brief pause, Emily agreed. "There's an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. With that, the line went dead. Marcus started the car again and headed toward the meeting point. Along the way, he thought about what lay ahead. This wasn't just about saving himself anymore. It was about stopping a group of extremists from unleashing their twisted vision on the world. Failure wasn't an option. When Marcus arrived at the warehouse, he parked the car out of sight and approached cautiously. The building was old and decrepit, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. Inside, it was eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the creaking floorboards beneath his feet. He called out softly, "Dr. Grant?" A shadow moved in the corner and Emily stepped into view. Her face was pale and her eyes darted nervously around the room. "You made it," she whispered. "For now," Marcus replied. "Did anyone follow you?" "I don't think so," she said, shaking her head. "But we can't stay here long. They'll come looking eventually." "Then let's make this quick," Marcus said. "Tell me everything I need to know about the facility." Over the next few minutes, Emily outlined the layout of the underground lab. There were multiple levels, each secured by guards and surveillance cameras. The central hub was located on the lowest level, protected by heavy doors and biometric locks. "Getting inside won't be easy," she admitted. "But once you're there, all you need to do is overload the system. The machine isn't stable. It'll self-destruct if you push it too far." Marcus absorbed the information, his mind working furiously to form a plan. "What about the guards? How many are there?" "At least a dozen," Emily replied. "And they're armed." Marcus nodded grimly. "We'll need a distraction, something big enough to draw their attention away from the hub." Emily hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, similar to the one she'd given Marcus earlier. "This will create an electromagnetic pulse. It'll disable the cameras and alarms temporarily, giving you a window to move undetected." "Good," Marcus said, taking the device. "Now what about you? Will you be safe here?" Emily shook her head. "I'm coming with you. You'll need my help to navigate the facility. Besides, I owe it to myself and to everyone else to see this through." Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. They were stronger together. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do this." The two set off toward the precinct, moving carefully to avoid detection. As they approached, Emily activated the EMP device, sending a wave of interference through the building. Lights flickered, and alarms fell silent. Taking advantage of the chaos, Marcus and Emily slipped inside and descended into the underground lab. The corridors were dark and eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the distant hum of the machine. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way to the lower levels. Along the way, they encountered several guards, but Emily's knowledge of the facility allowed them to evade capture. Finally, they reached the central hub. The massive machine loomed before them, its surface pulsating with energy. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting it to rows of monitors displaying complex data. Emily pointed to a panel on the wall. "That's the control unit. Overload. It and the whole system will collapse." Marcus nodded and stepped forward. As he worked, Emily kept watch, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling longer than the last. Then suddenly the machine emitted a loud whirring sound and sparks flew from the console. "It's working!" Emily exclaimed, her voice tinged with both excitement and fear. But their victory was short-lived. Footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Hayes, Ryan, and Doyle appeared at the entrance, their weapons drawn. "Stop right there," Hayes shouted. Marcus ignored her, focusing on the task at hand. With one final adjustment, the machine roared to life, its glow intensifying until it filled the entire room. Alarms blared, and the ground shook violently as the system began to collapse. "Get out of here," Marcus yelled, grabbing Emily's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy. Behind them, the machine exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the facility. The force knocked Marcus and Emily off their feet, but they scrambled up and kept moving. When they finally emerged into the cool night air, they collapsed onto the grass, gasping for breath. Flames licked at the edges of the building, illuminating the sky with an orange glow. For the first time in hours, Marcus allowed himself to relax. It was over. The Order of Purity had been stopped, at least for now. But Marcus knew the fight for justice was far from finished. As he looked at Emily, who smiled weakly despite her exhaustion, he realized they had taken the first step toward a better future. Together, they would ensure that no one else suffered because of hatred and prejudice. And though the road ahead would be difficult, Marcus vowed to keep fighting, for equality, for fairness, and for a world where everyone could thrive without fear. The explosion echoed like thunder, shaking the ground beneath Marcus and Emily's feet. Flames erupted from the underground facility, sending plumes of thick black smoke spiraling into the night sky. For a moment, they stood frozen, watching as the building collapsed inward, consumed by fire. Then reality set in. They weren't safe yet, not completely. "Come on," Marcus said urgently, pulling Emily to her feet. "We need to get away from here before someone sees us." Emily nodded weakly, still catching her breath. Her lab coat was torn and singed, and her face was streaked with dirt. But she managed to keep up as Marcus led her away from the chaos. Behind them, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Emergency vehicles were already racing toward the scene, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. As they reached a safe distance, Marcus stopped and turned back to look at the inferno. The sight filled him with mixed emotions. Relief that the Order of Purity's plans had been thwarted, but also sadness for the lives lost to their twisted ideology. He clenched his fists, vowing silently to ensure this kind of hatred never gained power again. "What now?" Emily asked quietly, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled, not just from exhaustion but from fear of what might come next. "We tell the truth," Marcus replied firmly. "Everything. The machine, the experiments, the Order. We expose it all." Emily hesitated, glancing nervously at the growing crowd of firefighters, police officers, and curious onlookers gathering near the ruins. "Do you really think anyone will believe us? This sounds insane." "It doesn't matter if it sounds crazy," Marcus said, his tone unwavering. "What matters is that it's true, and we have evidence. Their badges, the radio transmissions, even your knowledge of the facility. Together we can make people listen." Emily nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. She knew Marcus was right, but facing the world, after everything they'd been through, felt overwhelming. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of purpose swelling inside her. For years, she'd been forced to work under the Order, complicit in their crimes out of fear. Now, for the first time, she had a chance to make things right. As they approached the edge of the crowd, a young woman stepped forward. It was Clara, the same bystander who had filmed the traffic stop earlier. Her phone was still in her hand, and her expression was one of shock and disbelief. "Judge Johnson?" she asked, recognizing him immediately. "Is that you?" "Yes," Marcus replied, nodding. "Clara, isn't it? You were there when they pulled me over." Clara nodded, her eyes wide. "I recorded everything. I didn't know what to do with it, but I thought maybe it could help." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. "It will," he assured her. "In fact, it's exactly what we need. Can you share it with the news outlets? Show them what happened tonight." Clara hesitated, glancing at the burning wreckage behind them. "Are you sure about this? If you're involved in whatever caused that explosion—" "I'm sure," Marcus interrupted gently. "Trust me, Clara. This isn't just about me. It's about stopping something much bigger, something dangerous. After a moment's pause, Clara nodded. Okay, I'll upload it right now. With Clara's help, the footage began spreading. Quickly. Within minutes, snippets of the video appeared online, showing Marcus being detained unfairly and hinting at the corruption within law enforcement. Social media lit up with reactions ranging from outrage to disbelief. Reporters arrived on the scene almost instantly, eager to piece together the story. One journalist, a seasoned reporter named Lisa Monroe, approached Marcus and Emily. "Judge Johnson, can you explain what happened here tonight?" she asked, shoving a microphone in his face. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing this was his chance to speak the truth. "Tonight, I was targeted by members of a secret organization known as the Order of Purity. They used advanced alien technology to experiment on human DNA, attempting to reshape society according to their hateful beliefs. Their goal was to eliminate diversity, to erase anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of perfection." The crowd murmured, some skeptical, others horrified. Lisa pressed further. "And how did you stop them?" "We destroyed their machine," Marcus explained simply. "It was unstable, and when activated, it posed a threat not only to those inside the facility but potentially to the entire population. Dr. Emily Grant and I worked together to disable it before it could cause irreversible damage." Emily stepped forward, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I was part of their operation," she admitted. "They forced me to assist them. But I couldn't stand by any longer. Not after seeing what they planned to do." Her confession drew gasps from the crowd. Some looked at her with suspicion while others seemed moved by her courage. Lisa turned back to Marcus. "Do you have proof of these claims?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, we have physical evidence including recordings and documents. But more importantly, we have witnesses and survivors who can confirm everything we've said." By morning, the story had gone viral. News outlets across the country picked up the report, highlighting both the shocking revelations about the Order of Purity and the bravery of Marcus and Emily. Public outrage grew as details emerged about the experiments and the lengths the Order had gone to enforce their ideology. Calls for investigations into law enforcement agencies flooded social media, demanding accountability and reform. Meanwhile, federal authorities launched an official inquiry. Agents combed through the remains of the facility, recovering fragments of the alien machine and uncovering records of the Order's activities. Officers implicated in the conspiracy, including Doyle, Hayes, and Ryan, were arrested and charged with multiple offenses. Their smug expressions from earlier had vanished, replaced by fear and desperation. For Marcus, the aftermath was bittersweet. On one hand, justice was finally being served. On the other, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't truly over. Extremist groups like the Order thrived in secrecy, feeding off ignorance and fear. Destroying their base of operations was a significant victory, but it wouldn't eliminate the prejudice that allowed such organizations to exist in the first place. Determined to continue fighting, Marcus returned to his duties as a judge, using his platform to advocate for transparency and equality. He gave interviews, wrote articles, and spoke at rallies, urging people to remain vigilant against hatred and injustice. His efforts inspired countless others to join the cause, sparking a movement dedicated to exposing corruption and promoting fairness. Emily, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. With the Order dismantled, she devoted herself to studying alien technology responsibly. Partnering with ethical scientists and government agencies, she worked to ensure that humanity benefited from its potential without repeating the mistakes of the past. Her story became a symbol of redemption, a reminder that even those who had once been complicit could choose to stand on the side of good. As weeks turned into months, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an extraordinary event. Marcus often thought about the night everything changed. The fear, the chaos, the moments of hope amidst despair. Those scars remained, both visible and invisible. He knew he had made a difference. And as long as there were people willing to fight for justice, The future would always hold promise. Little did Marcus realize, however, that his actions had sparked something far greater than he could have imagined. Across the globe, others inspired by his courage began rising up against oppression in all its forms. From small towns to major cities, voices united in a chorus of defiance, refusing to let hatred win. In the end, Marcus's journey proved that even in the darkest times, light could prevail as long as someone was brave enough to ignite it. Months had passed since the explosion at the underground facility, but the impact of that night continued to ripple through society. Marcus Johnson sat in his chambers, reviewing case files and preparing for another day in court. Life hadn't returned entirely to normal, not that he expected it to, but there was a sense of progress. Investigations into the Order of Purity had uncovered layers of corruption within law enforcement and government agencies. Dozens of officers and officials were arrested, and reforms were underway to prevent such abuses of power from happening again. Still, Marcus knew the work wasn't done. Justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers. It was about building a better future. That's why he decided to dedicate this particular morning to something special, a public hearing aimed at addressing systemic issues exposed by the Sci-Fi scandal. He wanted to send a message. No matter how deep-rooted the problem, change was possible if people worked together. As Marcus entered the courtroom, he was greeted by an unusually large crowd. Reporters filled the front rows, their cameras clicking incessantly. Behind them sat ordinary citizens, teachers, students, activists, all eager to hear what he had to say. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of anticipation and hope. Marcus took his seat at the bench, pausing for a moment to look out at the faces before him. These were the people who mattered most, the ones whose lives were affected by decisions made in places like this. His voice steady, he began to speak. Today, we gather not just to discuss laws or legal procedures, Marcus said, his tone firm yet compassionate. We are here to talk about justice, not as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing force that shapes our world. Over the past few months, we have seen examples of both its absence and its triumph. Tonight, I want to focus on the latter. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he continued. What happened at the precinct was a wake-up call. It showed us that hatred and prejudice can take root even in institutions meant to protect us. But it also showed us something else, that courage and determination can overcome even the darkest forces. The room fell silent as Marcus recounted the events of that fateful night. He spoke of Officer Doyle's aggression, the lies used to justify his arrest, and the horrifying truth about the Order of Purity. He described Emily Grant's bravery in helping him sabotage the machine and the explosion that ultimately destroyed their operation. Every word carried weight, painting a vivid picture of the dangers they faced and the victory they achieved. But let me be clear, Marcus added, his voice rising slightly. This isn't just my story. It belongs to everyone who refused to stay silent, everyone who chose to stand up against injustice, people like Clara, who recorded the traffic stop and shared it with the world, people like Dr. Grant, who risked everything to do what was right, and yes, even people like you, ordinary citizens who demanded answers and refused to look away. Applause broke out briefly before Marcus raised a hand to quiet the room. While we celebrate this victory, we must also acknowledge the challenges ahead. Destroying the order was a significant step, but it won't eliminate the prejudices that allowed them to exist in the first place. Hatred doesn't disappear overnight, it lingers, waiting for cracks to exploit. Our job now is to ensure those cracks never form again. He leaned forward, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. How do we do that? By holding ourselves accountable, by listening to voices that have long been ignored, by teaching our children the value of empathy and understanding, and most importantly, by recognizing that justice isn't just the responsibility of judges or lawmakers, it's the responsibility of all of us. The room erupted in applause once more, this time louder and more sustained. Marcus smiled faintly, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful, not because the fight was over, but because so many others were joining him in it. After the hearing, Marcus stepped outside to find Emily waiting for him. She looked different now. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her lab coat had been replaced by a simple blouse and jeans. Yet her eyes still held the same determination he'd seen in the lab. "How did it go?" she asked, smiling nervously. "It went well," Marcus replied. "People are ready to listen, they're ready to act." "That's good," Emily said softly, "because we need all the help we can get." Together, they walked toward the parking lot, discussing plans for the future. Emily had already begun collaborating with ethical researchers to study alien technology responsibly. Her goal was to create guidelines ensuring its use would benefit humanity without repeating the mistakes of the Order. Meanwhile, Marcus planned to expand his advocacy efforts, traveling across the country to speak about equality and accountability. "I've been thinking," Emily said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. "Maybe we should start a foundation. Something focused on exposing corruption and supporting victims of injustice. We could name it after tonight. After everything we've been through." Marcus considered the idea for a moment, then nodded. "I like that. Let's call it the Light and Darkness Foundation. Because that's exactly what we're trying to do. Bring light where there's none." Emily grinned, her eyes lighting up. "Perfect." As they parted ways, each heading home to rest before continuing their work, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. From a routine traffic stop to a global movement, their journey had been anything but ordinary. Along the way, they'd faced fear, anger, and despair, but they'd also discovered courage, resilience, and hope. That night, as Marcus sat alone in his study, he pulled out a notebook and began writing. He wrote about the lessons he'd learned, the people he'd met, and the dreams he still held for the future. Someday, he thought, these pages might inspire others to keep fighting for justice no matter how daunting the odds. For now, though, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Outside his window, the city buzzed with life, its streets alive, with possibility. Though scars remained, both personal and societal, he knew healing was possible. All it took was time, effort, and a shared commitment to doing what was right. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting golden rays across the skyline, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he was ready. Ready to continue fighting, for justice, for equality, and for a brighter tomorrow. Because in the end, every battle worth fighting came down to one simple truth. Even in the darkest times, a single spark of hope could ignite a fire strong enough to light the way forward.